Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Greet the Week. I'm Jan Moray, and here is my co-host, Mona Duncan. And our topic for today is make room for joy. So it's a new year, and we have newness going all around us, and a fresh start, and and all of that, we need to make room for joy. Is that right, Mona?
Yes, it is. And in the little teaser about today, if you happen to see it on one of the places that it was in, I said that a new year speaks of newness all the way around. How's your joy level? Join Jan and Mona as we discuss 6 universal motivators and how to nourish them. So that will affect growth in ourselves as well as help to, in others. And then how that we can be challenged to look for joy. So I thought what we would do is start off by looking at what these 6 motivators are. Because I find that if have you ever been asked would you go in the other room and get the whatchamacallit for me? And you go in there and you've got a picture in your head of what a whatchamacallit is, but you look in there, it's not what, and so you pick something up and you take it back in there and say, well, here it is. And it says, not at all what I was wanting you to go get. So the thing of it is, if we don't have a picture of it in our head, we're going to have a difficult time getting on the same track. So I talked about, 6 universal motivators. But what is it? First of all, let's talk about what does it mean to be motivated. So give me some feedback. What does it mean?
Well, you have to feel like doing it.
Have to feel like it. Right. Okay. What else?
That it's not unpleasant. It's something that we dread doing. We have to really get motivated to do it. It's not going to be harmful.
Okay. So getting motivated. And then, so I came up with 6 things, and they all kind of feed off of each other. So we'll just talk about them. So one is that our thoughts motivate us.
Okay. Yeah. How we think about it.
Yeah. But the thing of it is I like to look at kind of a continuum here. And can thoughts motivate? Can they also demotivate?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I worked with a company one time that had some conflict within, and to help them define that conflict, I gave each person in that department a piece of paper, and they were to write down what motivates you and what demotivates you. And then we were to talk about it. And then what is your job and what is not your job. And then we talked about that. Because sometimes we are demotivated because somebody else is trying to do our job.
Right.
Or we're trying to do someone else's job. And if we can realize that, stay in our own lane, but sometimes you can move over and pass or slow down and get behind. But it's what does it mean to be motivated? And what does it mean to find that joy? But so our thoughts, we have to look at what our thoughts are. Is it something that's going to? We also need to look at what our feelings are. And our feelings, and I like to look at it in 2 different ways. It's emotional feelings as well as physical feelings.
Okay.
Yeah,
if something's too heavy for you, or you have to walk too far or something like that.
Right. Or if you have a headache.
Right.
That can be demotivating. And so it's the physical feelings, but then also on top of that, it's the emotional feelings. If we are looking at things gloomy and it's something I don't want to do, then we're thinking about this is going to be back to our thoughts that motivate us or demotivate us. So those are motivators. And then also movement, action. I mean, sometimes just going outside and feeling the air, whether it's hot or cool or rainy, just moving from one place to another, just standing up, some kind of movement can be a motivator if we'll allow it to be. Of course, all of these things that we're talking about none of them will work if we don't let them.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are things that we need to be motivated about to actually get up and participate in, but we won't let ourselves become motivated to do it. I had someone say the other day that they had a gripey tone of voice. Okay, let me put it that way. The person had a gripey tone of voice whenever they talked about the problem, and then they said, "Oh, well, it's not a big deal." And I looked at him. I said, "Well, you know what? It's really not a big deal unless you make it a big deal."
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with, we can talk all about things that motivate us, but unless we allow them to do that. And that kind of goes back into, what are we thinking? What are we feeling emotionally? What are we feeling physically? But we can overcome so many difficulties whenever we change our mind.
Yes, absolutely. Change the way we look at the problem, or look at what's going on.
Right. Change the way that we think about it. Change the way that we see if it's going to, if I have to or if I get to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, just that little way of looking at it is huge, whether I have to or whether I get to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about that every once in a while, when I'm finding a parking place and I end up having to park really far from the store that I want to go to. I think of, how grateful I am that I am able to walk that distance. So I get to walk that distance. It's not that I park too far away from the entrance to the store, as I am capable of walking that distance without any hardship.
Right. And that goes back with the emotional attitude of being thankful that I can, because there are folks that can't.
That can, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I was thinking, of course, I kind of have to put this in because you know me, how much I like words.
Yeah, right, of course. I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
that words are motivators, and especially the tone of voice in the word, and to whether or not, if we're trying to motivate someone else or encourage them, it has a lot to do with our tone of voice, our facial expressions, which all goes back with the physiology as well as the emotions of it. Mm-hmm. And to myself personally, I'm not going to turn my monitor where you can see that I have 3 right here on top of my desk and 3 over here things, because I'm very organized, and I find being organized is motivating.
Sure.
But even though all of these little stacks that I have, they're kind of little, they're smaller today than they were yesterday or Friday. But even though I've whittled them down a lot, there's a lot of steps in each one of these little packages here. And I was thinking, oh my word, and then I have this to do, and I have a couple other things that came up today. Had an appointment this morning that was longer than it needed to be. and anyway, so I was thinking, I'm sitting here, and one of my motivators is meditating. It's just thinking about and getting in a calm mood.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it looks like Mona's screen is frozen here. So maybe, okay. All right. You were frozen for a minute, so you're back. All right. You were talking about meditating and getting in a calm mood. And I think she is frozen again. But I think about, meditating. For me, my walk in the morning is like meditation for me. That I go first thing in the morning after I have my breakfast, is I go walk for a little bit, and then and if I don't, I feel like my day is all messed up. So it looks like Mona's back. So Mona, you were talking about meditating. We lost you for a little bit, so I was trying to fill in here.
Okay.
So you were talking about meditating. It reminded me of my morning walk that becomes my motivator for the day.
Exactly. And you can even be meditating while you're thinking about just
absolutely
appreciating the beauty and the air and all that kind of stuff. But just meditating, just really thinking about, I find that very inspirational. And there is a Bible verse that I like that motivates me, that says, I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength. looking for a higher power to overcome my inertia. But as I picked up this little booklet this morning, whoever wrote that little devotional had used that same scripture verse, but it was from a different translation. And it said, I can do this through Christ that gives me strength. And I knew that this was non-defined. And I'm thinking, all right, there's this pile and this pile and this pile and this pile and this pile. I can do all of this. What I guess what I'm trying to say is, once we kind of settle in on what our motivation is and what we will allow it to be, we can have a different definition. We can see it in a different way. That even though one thing is a health issue, one thing is a business issue, one thing is a financial issue, one thing is a communication issue, even though it's all those different kind of issues, whenever we kind of focus in on it, whatever this is, I can overcome it.
I can. You
And
can.
I think that, go
And
ahead.
I think what's so important with that too is, sometimes you feel so overwhelmed because you have all those piles around there and it just seems like there's just too much to do. But if you just start with one pile, so I'm just going to do one thing on this one pile, and then you kind of just look at one thing at a time instead of looking at the whole, you pretty soon you get 5 things done and you go, wow, that didn't take near as long as I thought it was going to take. And then that helps to motivate you to keep going.
Exactly. And even though, like I said, these are lesser piles today than they were Friday, because that's what I did Friday, was really, really get it. But there's still things that need to be done, and they are time consuming in all the little stacks here. But it is realizing that, as I was going to say, Henry Ford, he said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right.
Right.
We're right.
Yeah.
And so why demotivate ourselves? Begin to look at what is the job, or what is required of me, or what do I need to do? But sometimes it's what do I want to do? And how can we meld all of these together so we can get a little bit of all of it in the one thing that's going to contribute to joy in the process of getting the task done?
And even those things that you don't like to do, but there's nobody else who's going to pick it up if you don't do it, you do get a sense of satisfaction once you do complete it. So even though it might not be pleasant when you're going through the process, when you're done, you do get a sense of joy that you did it.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, we have these motivators and that we have to allow ourselves to be motivated by them. And so I thought, well, how could we begin to do that? If someone's listening at a later date that is not, know how to really change their mind. And I think, well, one is to just simply pay attention. To pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to your time schedule. Have you booked more things than you have time for? You have more on your plate, whether that's food or other stuff than you
than you can handle.
Yeah, because I put on here, one of the motivators whenever I was trying to limit them down to 6 would be to be nurtured. But if we're satiated, then it's just not going to work. We can be up to here satiated, that we'd be throwing up full, but we're not being fulfilled. And so it's not the busyness that gets things done. It's doing it in kind of in a timely manner and in a way that's going to do first things first. You can be as busy as can be, but if you haven't done it in a kind of in an in-step order, and sometimes we need to give some think time to that in changing our thoughts to get it in an in-step order. So to pay attention to what the need is, and then look internally for personal empowerment. And of course, what could be more empowering than to take responsibility for what is your part of the task
Right.
or your attitude in doing the task? And then to look into and time to just develop a good, healthy self-esteem, realizing that I may not want to do this right now, but I can. I bet if I put my energies to it, I could.
Right. And then I get it done with, over with, and I don't have to, it doesn't have to nag at me anymore.
Right. So that self-esteem and you know, in looking at that, I like to look at thinking that we're better than someone is not healthy, and thinking that we're less than someone is not healthy. So I mean, both of those take a lack. And so if we just realize, you know what, I'm not the best, I'm not the worst, but I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm okay. And realize, you know, I'm okay. And in being okay, I can do a good job.
And if you really do feel like you're deficient in something, is that something you want to do something about?
Exactly.
Because if it's still going to nag you that you're not okay, you're not good enough in this, well, is there something you can do that will help change your thoughts about it and help you to feel like you are accomplishing something?
Right.
That's such a defeatist attitude, you know, to think that you're not good enough to do something. But there's so many things we can do to be better. And so we can do those things. Or if we choose not to, then we just have to accept that we're just not going to be that good.
Yeah. And back to, you know, I was talking about the questionnaire that I handed out to all the people, to what motivates you, what demotivates you, what is your job, what is not your job. I know one of the things that demotivated was the fact that someone else didn't think I was capable.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, that just says gear yourself up and prove to them that you are.
Right, exactly. Don't accept that.
Yeah, I'm not talking ugly, hateful in your face. I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of that determination, going back to that, well, I'll just show you.
Right.
That I can do that. You know, at least give me a chance, give me an opportunity to show it. And then another thing is to think the fact, and I had them all to really look and discuss it. Do you know what someone else thinks?
Right.
Well,
have they told you that, or are you just taking that because of the scowl that they're giving you?
Right. Is that the thing that you're using to demotivate you?
Yeah.
You see, because we can do that. But, you know, that person with the snarky attitude,
Yeah.
even though they have the snarky attitude, well, that's not a big deal. But, well, it's not a big deal. It's a deal, though, but it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. And maybe, you know, we can learn to go through this. If we don't make it a big deal, it's not. And so that kind of goes back to, well, how then do we learn to have joy? Well, it's win-win. So that we can all win, so that we can help one another, so that we can work together, but or, you know, commune with each other and have and then just getting a new perception on life, because nothing is anything until we give it meaning.
Yeah. Well, and you know, going back to those people who don't think you're doing a good job, I mean, you can kind of look at that as a challenge instead of taking it as a demotivator, saying, you know, you're wrong, and I'm going to show you, and you're not going to bring me down, because it does. I mean, and sometimes that does. You know, when somebody thinks negatively of you, you take that in, and then your performance does get worse. Because of all the thoughts that are negative thoughts that are going on in your head. But if you can turn that around and say, I'll show you, you know, you're wrong. You know, I'm really pretty good at this if you just give me a chance.
Yeah. And then give space for them to change their mind.
Yes, right.
Give space for them to change their mind. So how then do we, one of the things that I'd said in our little blurb about today's talk was the fact that we'd be challenged to see life from a refreshing and energizing perspective. So is to realize that it really is all about choices.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a multitude of them. And as we think about the choices of if I got busy, would my headache be, would I forget it? You know, have you ever done that? Have you ever gotten so busy into something that you forget about
Oh
the
yeah,
pain?
the pain. Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes. It's
yeah,
amazing how that works. You
it
because your mind
is.
is taken off of it, and then all of a sudden you stop again. The pain comes back, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. And then to be gentle with yourself. That's not to say, oh, poor little you know, and it's not to put you in to pat you in your victim status.
Yeah.
It's to realize, hey, there is a lot of stuff here that needs to be done. And there's a lot of things and it's going to take more than today, and to realize that, you know, that it's
Yeah.
not it probably won't be done by 5 o'clock when the bell rings.
Right. You know, I think a fair amount about that whole victim status thing. And, you know, what are people really seeking? You know, are they seeking you to pat them on the back and tell them everything's okay and stuff? And is that really helpful? You know, or how do you tell somebody, well, what do you think about it? You know, what can you do about it? And try to motivate them to do something to change it. It just seems like so many times people are just looking for the sympathy and the pat on the back, and I mean the comforting pat, instead of the motivating statement that says, "Well, so what are you going to do about it?"
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was at a lecture not too long ago, and I'm a habitual note taker.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I had taken notes. And so anyway, I was talking with the speaker afterward, and the people was lined up to, you know, say something to the speaker also. And I was talking to the speaker afterward, and the person said, did you take notes?
Oh,
And I said, yes. I said, I always take notes. And she said, oh, well, that just deflated my ego. And I thought, well, you know, it's not about you, it's about me. I took notes. And the thing of it is, I didn't tell that person this, that the notes I took was not necessarily what the person said. It was ideas that it gave
good
me to
thoughts.
springboard for
Yeah,
something else.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, I thought, well, poor you. You know, apparently you gave a really good lecture, but apparently there's a little pity party there behind it. was anyway. It's to realize also that everything has trade-offs,
Mm-hmm.
and that again back here to these little piles of things that I have, and that they will, each one of them will have a little dent in it before I call it a day today.
Yeah.
But it still has a trade-off. There are things that do have to wait because it can't all be done in one time.
Yeah.
And then realizing that no matter what it is, this too shall pass. We'll
Yeah, I
either
think
learn more.
there's a quote I remember that says, nothing lasts forever, not even your problems.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And that problem will resolve some way.
Some way. May not be the way you want it to resolve right now, but some way, sometime it will.
And when you look back on it, you may realize, hey, that problem was really a blessing in disguise.
Right. Right. And that's such a good way to look at things that don't turn out the way you want them to do, because you can fall so easily into saying, poor me, nothing ever turns out right, you know, da 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 da, you know, instead of saying, okay, um, maybe this really is good for me. It's time for a change. It's time for me to try something.
Right, right, because that's one of the motivators is change.
Right. So for a lot of people, they say, I don't want change. Leave it just the way it is. Don't mess with it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also then, how do you learn to nurture this joy is to learn what's neutral
Okay, so
and
say
not
a
to
little
take,
more about that.
well, to look at the fact that, well, okay, here's the thing. Truth is neutral. If it's true, it's true.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
it's neutral. It doesn't matter if you're offended by it or if you're encouraged by it. It's neutral. A red light is neutral. That red light turns red because it's on the timer.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not to ruin your day.
Right. It's not to make you late.
Right, right. So it's determine what is neutral. It's looking at the fact that time is neutral, whether we use it or abuse it, whether we waste it or, it just keeps going on. We do not manage time, even
No.
though I have been guilty of talking about managing time and even
Yeah.
teaching a class called that. And I've changed my mind on that. You can't manage time. We can only manage how we use it and what we do in a productive way. And, money is not neutral. Money is neutral. It doesn't care if you waste it or if you save it. And so sometimes we really mess up our budget because we think that money said you have to have that you didn't have to have.
Mm-hmm.
Or there was something else that spurred you on. But money is neutral. How do you use it? How do you use your time? How do you use? And then also another motivator that can really nurture us to be joyful is to learn the secret of contentment. To be content with enough.
Right.
To be content. And it is something that needs to be learned because it doesn't come automatic.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's so easy to fall back into, nothing ever works right. And I wanted this and I only have this, this other thing. But this other thing that you have, it probably isn't as so bad as what you're making it out to be.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of other things to be grateful for and to be happy about. So put your attention on that instead of the thing that just didn't work out right today.
Yeah. And then I find another thing that can be a real motivator and nurtures in life is to look at the ironies of life. How that all these time savers become clutter and more time consuming than not. And such as fast foods, they may be fast, but are they good for us? Do they nurture us?
Right. They make us sick later on down the road.
Right. And it's looking at those ironies that it looks like this is good, but it turns out to be kind of goes back to the truth or dare, And then it's realizing that quiet time is essential. That we need to get in touch with who we are so that we can prove ourselves to someone in a way that's not, let me show you, or,
Right.
that is just by being who we genuinely are. And listen to your own self-talk. Words are motivating, but only if we're giving ourselves the right words.
Yes.
Sometimes we need to give ourselves a pat on the back. That, are you doing the best you can? That's something I always like to ask people. Well, did you do your best?
Right.
Accept the fact that it's good enough.
I think that's so important. That's a big question to ask. When people feel guilty about something, it's like, well, think back. At the time, did you do the best you knew to do at that time?
Right.
And focus on that instead of, yes, there's all kind of things you could have done. You don't know if that would have turned out any better or any worse. But at the time, you chose to do a certain thing, and that's what you decided at that time was the best thing for you to do. So quit beating yourself up. Let's go back and let's move forward from today. Okay, so would you do something differently now? So let's do that thing and just keep moving forward.
Yes. So hopefully, look at what motivates you, look at what demotivates you, and then you can or you can't. It's all up to you.
Yeah, it is.
You're right if you say you can or you can't.
Right. It's all up to you. Great words to end today. So thanks, everybody. We will be here next week on Martin Luther King Day, and we will be talking about Dr. King. And so I hope to see you then. And thanks to everybody who watches the recording, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.